We're nearing the end of August, and what it feels like is technicals of crypto are showing good signs, but the fundamentals of world-level economics, aren't they feeling bearish? They are to me. Now, today we have Paul joining us from Dfinity as we look at the charts to see what they might be telling us. Welcome to the Crypto Rain channel. I'm your host, Jay Rain. If you like money in crypto and you're looking for a seasoned investor's take on the crypto market, join the Rainmaker family. But do note, myself and Paul, we're not financial advisors. I do own or plan to own a lot of what I talk about on the channel on other videos. A lot of today, when we have Paul come on, are suggestions from viewers who put in the comment section what they want us to look at the following week. Shout out to our Patreon members. Thank you. We do have a private Discord that our Patreon members get access to. Now make it rain on that like button, strap in for the show, and let's welcome Paul from Dfinity. Paul, thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. Great to be here. We always say that we're at an important juncture, and I don't think we've ever been at a more important juncture than the one we're at now. So it's a very important show. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people are going to be on holiday. So with it being August, it's holiday mode. But you've got to be there every week to catch these big moves when they come. So it's going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to your take because I feel like those two things are pushing against each other. The technicals of crypto, I like a lot of what I'm seeing, but fundamental on a world level, like, yeah, like there's some crazy things going on, a lot of recessions kicking off in many countries around the world.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. I mean, the markets are forward looking. And as you know, the big story has been inflation. And wherever you look, there's inflation fears, inflation are in double digits. And to be fair, they are. But the main thing, the main story and the main profile and strategy that I've been looking at has been that the Fed had anticipated interest rate rises that from September this year and going out towards 2 years, the profile of interest rate rises have been easing back. And this isn't the story that you're hearing on the street. This is something I've been expecting and anticipating. It's been moving closer towards that. So if you think of it this way, the American investors or the American public have been pressed by higher gas prices, higher taxes, and lower demand, and this has been affecting companies now, and a stronger dollar as well to boot. And all these things are pushing the economy further back, not further forwards. The Fed will have to react to that, but they're talking a good game about inflation. So I think a lot of the move is in the price. Now, I could be wrong, as anyone else could be, but I think we're nearing the end of the dollar move, even though the dollar has actually moved up quite a lot since last week. We anticipated potentially that the dollar would move up, also that we'd see a correction in the equity markets, but the equity markets are actually performing pretty well, and I think they're a buy on the dips here. Now, again, I could be wrong, but the markets are anticipating or starting to anticipate that interest rates will be lower, and I think that's what's going to drive the markets going forwards. Also, the Fed was ahead of the curve of a lot of the other central banks in terms of raising interest rates. When they decide to do it, I think the dollar will start to weaken. Again, that will be positive for stocks. It'll also be positive for crypto. Gold looks like it's turned around. On top of that, some of the sort of higher technology stocks, like, I mean, if you look at Apple stock, it's booming. If you look at the SMH, which is an ETF that relates to semiconductors, that looks like it's reversing. So whilst we've got quite a nasty pullback in the cryptocurrencies, and to be fair, we were looking for that. We thought there would be a bit of a pullback. If things stabilize very close to where we are now, we could be looking at a really good potential buying opportunity. If things stabilize at current levels and start to move higher, I think we could see quite a big move. But we have to let the dollar play out its strength. So I'm kind of pushing against that trend for the moment. If I can show you a chart of the dollar index, we can see exactly where it is now. So you
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I was looking for a top at 108, and we got this correction down, and it started to look like everything was working in terms of this correction becoming a bigger one. But then it broke this downward trend line. It's gone for another move to the upside. Now, I'm not going to rule out a break into new highs because it's near a high. As a technician, I'm forced to kind of buy a new high, but I'm very reluctant to do so. The part of the reason why is because we've been looking at this trend for over a year, this bullish trend in the dollar. And for me, it feels a little bit late to be getting really excited about a dollar bull market. So whilst it's going to be going up, I'm going to be looking for any signs of weakness with which to go short the dollar and look for things like gold and cryptocurrencies to move higher. So if we look at the yield markets as well, this is the 10-year yield. We got a head and shoulders reversal pattern which completed a top. Now, sometimes when the market completes an even bigger top, it kind of negates one top to create an even larger one. So it's in a bit of a no man's land here, where its yields are pressing higher, but they're not pressing into new highs. They're just kind of reversing some of the previous, this previous downward leg. So again, it looks like yields might edge up a little bit, and 2-year yields, to be fair, are looking like they're going to try and squeeze higher into a new high. But I don't think they're going to stay up there for very long. I think things will start to come down again because, again, pressure on the economy will come to bear. And I think they're going to be reversing these moves. So I mentioned that the equity markets were doing very well. And if I could just pop the chart of the NASDAQ up here, you should be able to see that this has had a really good run. So this is like the first wave of bullish wave of a recovery. And we've seen a correction. So as long as it corrects and holds support between sort of 12,000 and sort of 11,800, I'm fairly comfortable with this as a pullback before it continues its upward trend. So it sounds like all doom and gloom. I know that the headlines are going to be looking at potential recessions, but remember, recessions mean that politicians have to react. And when they react, they usually provide stimulus, and that's usually good for the asset markets.
Yeah, good points. Do you mind if we look back at the dollar price?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to go back a little bit on that timeline.
Yeah.
So we had go back. What is the timeline of when it peaked and then the dollar price came down? No, to the left.
Yeah.
Let's look back historically. Farther left.
Okay, so you want to see here. Yeah.
What date is that? I can't see. It says accept all cookies is in the way of that date.
Yeah. I've got that too. So that was March 2020. So that was the high point, March 2020. So that was one of the reasons why I was pretty bullish, because it broke that previous high, and I expected an extended move because it had broken that high. But if we go back even further, this is not the ultimate.
What's interesting about that dollar price falling is we had Bitcoin really started its climb late 2020, right? So that when prices of the dollar were falling, and that's why I want to look at that date. Bitcoin had been bouncing around all the way in March of 2020. It came all the way down to like 3,800. But it was bouncing around sideways between 6,000 and 10,000 for quite a while. And then starting about October through January, October 2020 through January 2021, it really took a big run. So I wanted to look how that correlated with the dollar and the dollar price.
Yeah, I mean, there's not necessarily a one-to-one relationship with the dollar and Bitcoin. But the reason why it's moving in this way is because we have come out of a period of very low interest rates, which means that people have been, when interest rates are low, they have been putting their money in more risky assets. So if you consider that potentially Bitcoin is a riskier asset, the potential for it to rally more when interest rates are low, people will borrow money and put it in there, which they shouldn't do, but they will. They'll borrow money and put it in real estate and all other risk-on assets. So things like that will go higher. And so the dollar strength is coming because interest rates have gone up. It's like a reflection of it. But there could be a time when interest rates will continue to go up, which I think they will, and the dollar won't strengthen. In fact, I think we could even see it flip, because you have to look at it on the basis of the way it's trading compared to other countries. So if other countries are raising interest rates or are in a different part of the cycle, rates may be going up, but the dollar may start to fall. So I think we've seen the bulk of the move. Again, we could see a bit of a blowout, and there is potential for it to move a bit higher against a basket of currencies. But I think the best of the move has happened, and we should now see it reverse. So I think that's a positive sign for risk on. It's also a good sign for the US asset market in terms of the stock prices, because overseas earnings will start to look a hell of a lot better. So so we shall see, is what they say. But we're at a very interesting point here, because I think a lot of people are watching this pullback. And as you said at the top of the show, everybody's extremely bearish, expecting the market to go much lower. Now, that to me says that they're shorting it, or they're already short. So if it doesn't continue lower from here, much lower, and if it even starts to go up, they're going to get really squeezed hard. Now, they could be right and I could be wrong. So I'm willing to change my view. That's the thing about technicals, and the markets. You can be wrong. But I'm still going to go with the positive outlook and say that cryptocurrencies are based. We are forming what could be a longer term base. It may take a bit longer because of the period of time that we're in at the moment, i.e. the holidays, and also the final phases of the dollar strength. But ultimately, we should see these trends resolve with an upside trend.
Awesome.
So we should see. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I can only sort of look at what I've got in front of me. And as I say, the SMH, look at this chart. I think we've got some SMH. Here we go. This is a semiconductor index. And if we zoom into this, it's forming what I think to be an inverse head and shoulders. I'm just going to go back into a daily chart because it makes it a little bit clearer. Let me just put that in auto. So this is the left shoulder. This is the head. This is the right shoulder. So as long as it can hold support down to about 2013. So, we could be in for a little bit more of a retracement, but as long as it holds it and then starts to go back up again, then I think that's a positive sign for the technology stocks overall. And if we look at, let's say, let's get one of these key stocks up here. So remember, I mentioned Apple. I mean, look at Apple; it's flying. It's just really near the high. Some other stocks aren't. Amazon's doing better. Like there was a lot of bears here getting ready to short it if it broke 101. It gapped to the upside. It's coming back for a retracement. Google, okay, that's still consolidating. We've got Meta, which is underperforming. So I think Decentraland will start to move higher when Meta moves up. But this is still a consolidation. It could break lower. That's possible. I don't like it when markets get too close to their prior lows. But that's still not enough for me to be broadly bearish. If everything was turning down or near the lows, then I'd say fair enough. What else have we got? Microsoft. That's not a bearish chart. That's a strong bull move with a retracement for now. So, I'm waiting to be proven wrong. And if I am, we'll see it in the price action. But for the moment, I'm going to sort of stand my ground and say, let's stay with the positive outlook until we see otherwise.
Yeah, I love it. I would love for it to be us to go up in the short term and do tremendously well. In fact, I'm still hopeful for that. But I'm prepared. That's why I don't trade on any leverage, so that I can just wait and be patient, even if it does take longer.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think to be fair, these next few weeks, you have to be braced for a bit of a bumpy ride regardless. So, but either way, if we can hold in some lows, both the equity markets and Bitcoin and Ethereum's been trading pretty well. I mean, it's had a pullback, but we expected that last week. Bitcoin has been a bit more muted. We would have hoped that play catch up. It didn't. I think we were a bit suspicious of that last week. We did talk about how it could potentially pull back. But, again, there are a lot of bears out there looking to short it. If it doesn't go down, they're going to get squeezed.
Yeah. A really nice squeeze would be nice. It seems like out of Washington, D.C., there seem to be hints at some bullish news. Number one, the BlackRock deal with Coinbase is a big deal, and they probably wouldn't have done that if they didn't have their fingers on the pulse of the sentiment in Washington being bullish, as well as Mr. Wonderful has been making a lot of trips to talk to a lot of the lawmakers in Washington, and he seems very bullish. So that's all good news behind the scenes that we don't know exactly what those conversations look like, but it seems like it's going well.
Yeah.
Let's take a look.
I think broadly speaking, the long-term outlook is bullish for the whole sector. I mean, it will be. It's just a question of whether the macro situation supports it or not. Even if we go into another downward phase, if we've got to endure another down leg, I still think long term this will be resolved by, say in 2 years' time, things will be much higher. So, it's we have to take things to a certain extent one step at a time. But this technology is definitely not going away. And I was fairly early on looking at Bitcoin when I started studying it in 2010. I must admit, I was a bit more dismissive of it back then, expecting there to be too many copycats for it to really, develop further and capture the public imagination. But then the more I studied it, the more I realized actually my initial view was wrong. And this is just amazing technology that will continue to change the world. So, but that takes time, and it will be a long time before the man on the street gets to that point and invests in it, even though it feels like so many people are already involved with it already, because we're in this bubble of people who understand the technology. It feels like everybody already knows about it, and of course there are waves of that. Like if we look at the .com boom, the first phase is everybody just piling in without really understanding anything about the technology, just hoping to make money. Then you get the shakeout where the weaker hands who don't really know what they're doing get forced out of the market. And then the next phase is the true sort of long-term solid projects continue to develop, and they maintain their standing in the market. And those are the ones that continue forward and become, the big companies of the future. So we shall see.
Yeah, would you mind? Let's take a look at Bitcoin's chart. It's interesting how the price did come right back down.
Yes, absolutely. So this was so we were looking at the rising lows last week, but overall, as long as we can stay on this upward trend line, then I'm going to maintain a bullish view. Now, this is the medium-term moving average that it's gone from downwards to flat, and if it can rally here, it will start to turn up again. The longer-term moving average is still turning down, but that's to be expected because it's been in a main downward trend. And I'm not going to confidently predict the end of this bear market until this trend line is broken. But at this low point, it was a very good reason for us to say this could be a very significant low. And overall, the price action is still higher from there. So although it's not been as a powerful as move in Bitcoin as it has been in Ethereum, the trend is still upwards. So I'd like this trend line to hold. Admittedly, we're sitting right on it, which is kind of dangerous because it could very easily break and go for another downward move, which I would not like to see, but that is possible. The market will do what the market wants to do.
Yeah, and at least if it's going to do it, I'd rather it do it and get it over with, so that then we can, that way it can just reset everything. So what I like about low points is low points don't last forever, and the markets do turn around. And right now we're looking at it thinking, there's a chance the low was already in, and it's interesting how it came right back to that support and is hovering around there. So it's a decision point. If it breaks lower, so be it. I don't want it to, but it's going to do what it does. But things don't stay down for forever, and that's where the patience just plays in long term, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And so if we look at Ethereum, look at night and day difference. This is a much sharper move. The base was cleaner, and it's even starting to rally like now, sort of ahead of the equivalent support. So if I just flip back again to Bitcoin, you can see it's very compressed price action. It's staying tightly within this range here. But Ethereum is already pushing away from that. So it's not so compressed. It's already trying to get back up. So buying is coming in. It hasn't even touched its medium-term moving average. and it's not anywhere near its upward trend line. So it depends whether you want to see the glass as half full or half empty. And I guess you could read it either way. I mean, I would say that's kind of fair enough if somebody says, well, I'm actually more bearish because Bitcoin looks like it's going down. But either way, in a synchronized bear market, you would expect them both to be moving down. And I think overall, because there was such a big panic into that low that we saw in June, which also married with the stock market low, I think the onus is on the bears to sort of prove they can get the market lower, rather than the bulls to say, well, is this, as long as this trend holds above the previous low, it's an upward trend. So that for me, it's relatively simple. But we shall see, as they say.
Yeah, let's jump into some of the altcoin picks.
Yes.
These are picks from viewers last week's video. If you want us to review the price action on some video, up to 2 picks for next week, just put them in the comments below, and especially like it if you put what you like about them, and we'll take a look at them. This is TRVL. This is it's basically like travel on the blockchain.
Yes, I remember we talked about this before, and what we had here was this potential descending triangle. So you can see how these lows have been getting lower, and you can see how support has just held in. Now, that's usually very dangerous, but this point here on the 26th of July was when the market should have gone down. The market did not go down, and that's kind of negating this as a bearish trend. Now, it's not quite bullish yet, because the next step is it needs to go through resistance and start to turn up. But I think that's a good first point that it's made, i.e. it's not followed through on the downside, it's held support, and it's trying to rally. So I would say, it's still a wait. We can't just jump in yet. If you're really sort of, speculative, I suppose you could have a nibble at it and just hope that the low holds in, because at least you've got a jumping out point if it breaks this low. Personally, I prefer to see it break through this 7.4 cents, 7.35 to 4 cents level, and take out this sort of 8 cents level here. Those would be the big resistance points. But prior to that, if I could just show you, we were looking at it here like this, which I think we may have been. That, to me, that chart at this point would have looked very dangerous. So I'm pleased to see that it's held that low. And I've seen this in a couple of charts as well. We've seen it in a few markets where it looked like it was going to extend down, and it's just turned into a range and started to move up. So it wouldn't surprise me to see this resistance level get taken out and actually trade higher over the next few weeks and months. But I need confirmation. So for now, I'm going to have to say a wait.
Yeah, for me, here's a quick look at the fundamentals. Let me just share a few numbers on here. The market cap's fairly low. It's at 7.4 million market cap. Now, keep in mind, only 12% of the tokens are in circulation, and probably there's going to continue to be some token vesting. But the market has turned around. Well, you see this nice rounded bottom. Long term, I'm not sure I like travel industry cryptocurrency projects, because I don't understand the value of. I've seen many come and go over just the past 5 years, and good name on this, or good ticker symbol, TRVL. But why would you need a specific cryptocurrency token related to travel? You'd be able to use, say, ETH or Cardano or Bitcoin for traveling. And they say, yeah, but we have special negotiated contract prices. And it's like, yeah, just like Trvl and Expedia and all of those. So I don't understand the special need of why this type of project needs to be on the blockchain. That's my feeling on it fundamentally, and that's why I don't invest in travel projects. I did in my early days just because I didn't know what I was doing, and maybe I'm wrong on this. I've been wrong before. That's just one of the questions I have, and it's one of the questions I ask about Drive, which I am invested. Why does Drive need to be on the blockchain? Well, specifically, you have to have, in order to create a franchise of theirs, you have to have their tokens and stake it. In order to be able to do a local franchise and own a local franchise, which actually makes sense. It's a little bit interesting, driving doesn't need to be on, like Uber and Lyft doesn't need to be on the blockchain, but that one does have a special use case of their tokens. So I'm open to TRVL also having a use case that makes sense. That's just my concern. Now, even with that concern, what's funny is that doesn't mean this can't do well. Doesn't mean that at all. It doesn't mean it can't do well, especially in the short term or medium term, if a lot of money comes in. It means that if they don't have a really special use case or hit a really good trajectory, they won't make it long term. But you know, the chart is looking actually decent for this, as we see this nice rounded bottom. But fundamentally, that's why I'm not in any travel projects like this.
Okay, great.
Let's take a look at the next one, Solend.
Okay, so Solend, I think, which is one that I'm pretty sure we've looked at a few times now. As you can see here, we've had this very strong downward trend, and this would have been one that I wouldn't have touched because it was in a downward trend in this phase, like sort of prior to around the middle of July, because there was nothing technically to say that we could buy it. But the first signs of it turning around was some very strong green candles. So we see this reversal was almost like a V low. So around here, we got the first signal to potentially buy. It broke the trend line and it moved higher, which is good. Now, it's come in for a bit of a retracement, so is the rest of the market. I'm not going to criticize it for that because everything's come down. But in a bull trend, you have to have some form of pullback. It can't be a straight line up. It's probably a bit dangerous if it is a straight line up, no matter how much we would like it to be like that. So we got a pullback. It's starting to find a bit of support at 65 cents. So last few days, it's been moving higher from that. I'd like to see it build from there. And also, if that can hold, then we can start drawing a trend line from that low. And at this sort of angle, for around 45 degrees, it's much more sustainable than a very sharp upward trend that obviously inevitably has to pull back. So overall, I think this has gone from a very strong downward trend to emerging signs of a potentially new bullish trend from here. I would say I'm positive on this and a buyer as long as it holds over 60 cents.
Cool. Fundamentally, I like this project. I like the backers on it. Let me share my screen. A few numbers, which is interesting. Now, I was buying this at a lot higher price. I saw a token vesting schedule on this for the pre-sale investors, and the token vesting for them had really long lockups. So I'm not quite sure where so much circulating supply has been added from, but that is what has crushed this price much further. Now, it's kind of like sometimes this happens, right? And it's frustrating because I was buying this, probably my average price on this is around $4. And it's frustrating to get savage like this in the short term because I haven't sold any of it. What I do is I look for opportunities to accumulate more in projects I believe in long term. And long term, I really like this one. It has some of the best backers in the industry, which is what attracted my attention to begin with on this. And kind of like my, sometimes these investments I make where there's really good backers, sometimes I get in, and in the short term, it looks like I'm very wrong. Like Axie Infinity, I bought that land and only to get savaged in the short term. The prices dropped by 2/3, probably even more at the very bottom. I stopped paying attention because it was so depressing. But in the long term, that one made me a 100x. And if I had held just a few months longer, it would have actually been like 12,000x or some crazy number. So I can't complain about how that investment did. Solend, I've gotten savaged in the shorter term, but I really like this one for the long term. Market cap's 15 million. 22% of their supply is now in circulation. This number used to be a lot lower. And so there's been a lot of tokens coming in, pressing down this price. But it does look like maybe the bottom is in. Maybe is definitely the operative word. But at 68 cents, that's an amazing price, in my opinion. I like it. If I were to rate this, whether it be a buy or a wait or a sell, for me, it's a buy. And maybe just because I'm so jaded that for me, that price seems so cheap because I was buying it when it was $6 and $4. So for you, this was a wait, right?
Well, whilst it's over 60 cents, I said it was a buy. So I'm sort of going with the positive outlook, even though it could do accelerating, but it's moving higher. So whilst above 60 cents, I'm bullish.
Sounds great. All right. Let's take a look at our next suggestion. Now, one of our viewers asked for Cortex. I think the Cortex they're asking for is a token that they haven't launched, and we've had Cortex join us. I spelled that wrong. There's no I in there. Cortex with that was just me typing fast.
Okay.
Oh, maybe. Okay, so they're probably asking about a different Cortex than what I was thinking of. That might be it.
Right. So yeah. So this is Cortex against the US dollar. That looks up to date. Well, this is interesting in the sense that it's clearly in a longer term range. So we have got a strong trend here to get our teeth into. But what we have got is some really nice technical levels where we could turn quite bullish. And that would be if we can flip through this 17 cents level, because that to me is so pivotal. So if we look here, it's resistance, support, resistance. So really pivotal level here. Now, given the big picture, is it really going to turn around right now at this point? I don't know. I can't justify it based upon the current price action because it's too balanced from this bigger picture perspective. But I would say that if it can get through the 17 cents level, it would look much better. So perhaps for a short-term trade that could turn into something more substantial. But for the moment, I'd have to say, it's a wait for me to see how it trades when the rest of the market is trending higher. I like the fact that it's relatively stable or has been relatively stable when the overall market has been volatile. But I think for me to get bullish, I need to see more of an upward trend here, and for its sort of beta values to become more correlated with the broader market if that's moving higher. So for the moment, I think it's a wait, but it's not a negative wait. It's just like, broadly speaking, it hasn't been trending higher. So I'm going to have to wait for its dynamics to change.
Great points. Yeah, for me, this is a wait as well. Now, this Cortex, I have owned this in the past. It's been a couple of years, actually, since I owned any. And I hadn't given it a lot of thought. Now, really big about 3 years ago were all these AI projects. Oh, it's AI on the blockchain was a really big buzzword, right? And I haven't seen a lot of those projects do well. In fact, many of them have done very poorly. So that doesn't mean Cortex will do poorly in the long term. It would make sense in the future that AI is going to be a big part of the blockchain, because blockchain, all that is permanent data that's there, right? And of course, AI harvesting that and turning it into usable information, because there's so much information out there. You pretty much need AI to be able to make sense out of everything that's there. Now, whether this project will do good long term, I don't know. So it's got a previous high way back in the previous bull run, early 2018. It hit like 230. It's currently trading about 13 cents. For me, it would be a wait. I don't know how positive I am at this point on the AI narrative, except for I can't say I'm not interested at all in AI projects, but there is one on Cardano that I like, because essentially who they call the father of AI technology is involved in that. So I know that team has some of the best people in all of AI, and that's the only AI project I'm in. So for me, this wouldn't be a buy. If I saw some technicals that I really, really liked, I would buy it. But for now, it's just a wait. And if I held it, it would just be more of a short-term play, because it's not one I would hold long-term, even though I hope it does really well. For me, I'd rather be in something that I feel more certain about long-term, unless I saw great technicals that I'm going to hold it for maybe a month or two, take advantage of a price run.
Cool.
Let's take a look over at Beam.
Beam, the next one. Yeah, Beam. So this has like a similar structure in terms of the short-term base. If you have a look at this price action here, and I'll just flip back, you can see it's almost like a mirror image, pretty much, which is interesting. The way it's just coming up this rising trend line. But similarly, I think for me, this is also a wait, because we got this big spike up here with lots of volume, which has kind of come back again. So I'm not sure what was behind that, why it went up so much, why there was so much interest that's kind of faded back. But overall, it is trying to base out. So it's definitely a lot better than what we were seeing here. That was like a nosedive. So it's managed to hold the stall, but now we need to start turning up. Now this first phase was good. You know, that should really have held here and held support around these levels, around 18 cents. Dip to here, that was fine, but it's like dipping a bit low for me. So it's going to have to be a wait, but if it can get back up towards this sort of low 20s and perhaps even through this resistance at 26, I think it would look much more interesting. If I had to hold it long term, like if I was forced to trade it here, I would say as long as it holds over this line, I've got somewhere to exit the market. So, but I'd prefer to jump into something that's accelerating a bit more rather than holding something that looks like it's still in a consolidation phase. So for me, it's a wait, but I do think the price action is interesting. I do think it trades very interestingly from a technical point of view, because it has respected the support and resistance level here. So if it can break through that at 28, I think we're off to the races. So perhaps we need to revisit it in a little while.
Yeah, I would love to see. I like the narrative that this is in. It's a privacy token. So let me share some details. So Beam, here's the website, and Beam is confidential cryptocurrency, confidential DeFi token. Now, one of the great things about Cash is that there's a privacy aspect to it that, you know, people can't necessarily see what you're buying and selling. You say, well, I have nothing to hide. And you'd be surprised how, even if you have nothing to hide, somebody who wants to ruin your life can take and they can find something and turn it into something malicious, even if it wasn't. And so there's a certain aspect of privacy that's amazing and great. Now you're seeing the governments in the world attack anything related to privacy transactions and private transactions. And the words they always use is, anti-money laundering and terrorism, right? And yes, some of those things are used for exactly that. The number one used vehicle for those things today is cash. And they're not outlawing cash, or they're not saying they want to outlaw cash, but they actually want to outlaw cash. And maybe it's for the reasons they say, but I always take what the government says with a grain of salt. And I always think, is it really for what they say? Sometimes it's hard to tell. So I like the privacy narrative. I like where this token is at. I don't know so the governments are definitely attacking everything crypto privacy related. And so we saw that with Tornado Cash, and there's probably more to come. And even though I absolutely love this narrative, and I hope that some projects really survive that way, though I like this token, and I kind of like where its token price is at. For me, it's just a wait, because I'm waiting to see how things go on a more fundamental level with governments and other things. So I don't have any of this. If I did have any, I would just be holding it, but I'm not putting any new money in on this. So for me, it's just a wait, even though I like this. I mean, it's been around for a long time and it survived through a lot. The market cap's at 20 million. It's half of its tokens essentially are in supply. or in circulation already. So that's my thoughts. Thank you to the viewer who suggested this. Let's take a look at Netvrk's token. You're still on mute, Paul.
Yeah, I'm on mute. Yeah,
Paul is in a restaurant in Italy.
Yes,
and
I'm in a restaurant in Italy, and it's quite noisy sometimes, so I mute myself just so you don't hear the background chatter. But yeah, I just took that off. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Yeah, this is interesting from a technical point of view, in the sense that remember that sort of declining descending triangle that I was talking about, and how after a certain period of time, if it doesn't go down, the market goes up. It sort of fails to follow through, and that's also a sign. So a fail pattern also does give us information. Well, this is what happened here. It didn't follow through to the upside. Then it rallied, which is a really decent move. That's a really nice rally, and pretty much doubled. And then it's come off again. So, but this move here is a bit disappointing because it's so aggressive all the way back down to that starting point, which makes me a little bit concerned about jumping in here. Will it go through these lows, or will it stop? I can't buy into a dive like this until I know that there's proper support. Also, I'd prefer there to be a break of this downward trend line, which it got very close to. If it could hold again and then do another rally, it doesn't even have to be as big as this one. It will break that trend line because it's obviously declining over time. So there's reasons to potentially be positive on it if it can hold this low and start to rally. Unfortunately, the opposite is also true. If it takes this low out, that's such a massive technical level. You know, I would be very worried that if it breaks that, it's going to have a bit of a lurch lower. So we're at such an important point for this particular coin and technology that I think I'd have to be cautious and say wait. But where I would find it interesting is if it holds this low. Also, if it breaks that trend line, you know, I think it could look really interesting. So we'll have to revisit this one too.
Yeah, this one will be great to keep an eye on. It looks like it might want to go lower. I'm not sure what's driving it going lower like that. Maybe some vesting or something. This one's been around for a little while, and I made a killing on this one. And I talked about it when it was really cheap back here, and it went up tremendously. And now, unfortunately, I didn't realize that Metaverse or Facebook was going to announce their big Metaverse change. Otherwise, I would have held it longer, because I was able to sell this around these prices and, yeah, made great returns. Had I known, though, look at this. Let me take it and put it on linear scale. How high it went after Facebook made their announcement, all the way to like $7 at the top. Crazy. And it's pulled all the way back. And like I say, I like to buy when it's boring and sell when everyone's pumping it, and when Facebook is got everyone excited about the metaverse. And that's exactly what I did. So I think I hold some tokens. I have a bunch of their land. I invest about $70,000 in their land because I do believe in this project really strongly. Their token for me right now is just a wait. If we look at a recent timeline, that perhaps there's some token vesting or something going on. So for me, it's a wait on the price, though I like what the team behind this is doing. So I'm a strong believer in the project. That price looks like it wants to go lower, though, to me. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I like the sector very much, and I think it will be a really interesting one. But broadly speaking, the whole sector's under a bit of a cloud. I think we'll see it turn around when Metastock starts to move up, and perhaps more people get interested in the narrative. But yeah, for the moment, I think we're going to have to wait a bit longer. I remember with Decentraland, when I was quite bullish on it, I think you were a little bit more cautious. So you were absolutely right about that. And we did see a much bigger retracement. But I'm sort of much more of a 5-year outlook on that. Mm-hmm. So I think that's one of the only sectors where I just think it was really going to take a long time. And I'm willing to sort of put in that longer term view on it. So, and that would apply to Netvrk, I guess. I didn't know it was part of that. So we shall see. But yeah, for the moment, technically week to week, it doesn't look like it's moving in any immediacy. So we can afford to wait.
Yeah, fully agreed. Let's take a look at this next project, Immutable X. IMX is their ticker symbol.
Yeah, so Immutable X, if this is the correct one, which I think it is, I like this price action in terms of it creating a base. So I can see this as an inverse head and shoulders. So we've got the downward trend, which has stalled from around the middle of June, 10th of June. It's been going sideways. So what was a downward trend is now, this is all basing price action to me. It's coming back into support and trying to go back up again. So this is the left shoulder. This is, for me, is the head. This is the right shoulder, which means that it needs to hold over 77 cents for it to remain bullish. But if it can move up and take out this as a neckline, now, believe it or not, that would make it bullish around $1.30, sort of 35 to 40, perhaps by the time it does it. Now, you might say, well, why don't you just buy it here at 88 cents as opposed to when it breaks this trend line? Well, the reason is because if it does break this trend line or this neckline of this reversal pattern, then I'd be projecting a move at least to sort of $3. So from 1.4 to $3 is the beginning potentially of a major move. Whereas where it's trading here, we're still in a basing phase. So it's not clear that it's completely based as yet, even though the probabilities are shifting towards it to move higher. So very interesting chart. I would like to keep a close eye on this. Because this base is becoming large, and a larger base usually means a larger rally once it's resolved. But for the moment, it's a wait, unfortunately.
Yeah, I really like this one for the long term. I'm going to share some things on it. Immutable X, I think of who they're a lot alike, right? And I would actually put them and Polygon the same plane. Polygon's current market cap is 6.1 billion. And Immutable X's market cap is 200 million. However, only 1/10 of the supply, or a little over 1/10 of the supply of Immutable X is currently in circulation, whereas Polygon has almost 75% of its total supply in circulation. So there's going to be a lot more tokens vest. And that's part of what's putting supply pressure, or putting price pressure down on this. But I do think Immutable X is going to be one of those layer 2 blockchains that's around for a long time, that a lot of games and other things are building on. Now, perhaps that becomes less important if the ETH merge goes successful and ETH's blockchain can handle much greater speeds, but probably as more of the world comes onto it, ETH just isn't going to be fast enough, and they need some layer 2 solutions like Immutable X to handle a lot of the games running on them. And so I like Immutable X. It was built by the Gods Unchained team, or at least commissioned by it, because they needed something to be able to run as a side chain. So, yeah, I followed it for a long time. I wasn't able to participate in the pre-sale, though I did get some of this token because I had Gods Unchained's initial Genesis cards. And I sold them as it was pretty clear the price was going to continue falling. And I've been looking for a good entry. And on this, I'm still waiting. I'm so tempted at the price that it's at now to go ahead and buy some. But I just know more of this more of these tokens are going to be coming in circulation, putting downward price pressure. That doesn't mean it can't pump. That just puts a small amount of downward price pressure. That only continues to drop the price if there isn't enough buying pressure to counteract that. But with even a medium amount of buy pressure coming in, the price on this would pump tremendously because there's only a little bit of sell pressure related to that vesting going on. But those are some of the things that I'm weighing on this one. I really, really like this one for the long term. I wouldn't be surprised if long term these two have similar market caps. But keep in mind, the fully diluted valuation on this is 1.7 billion, and the fully diluted valuation on Polygon is 8.3 billion. So realize that this is only like 1 or 1/5 as cheap. Like at the current price, think of this as if it 5x from here, it would essentially be at the same price as where Polygon is now. So, and I'm an investor, so I'm very price sensitive. I'm always looking for buying as low as possible, and then holding till it's much, much higher. So I like Immutable X. For me, it's still a wait. Though I'm so tempted. I've almost pulled the trigger a couple times on this of buying in because I really, really like it. And so, yeah, I'm weighing those different factors. Not like this is a bad price. It's not a bad price at all. And in the future, I think it'll be a lot higher. But I haven't bought, even though I'm waiting on this one. And I've been very close to pulling the trigger. Let's take a look at Audius, which is, we haven't looked at it in a little while, so it'd be fun to take a look at it again.
Sure. Well, what we've got here is some really superb support around 26 cents. So this was the breakout we saw here. This was a really nice base that I'm hoping some of the other markets are going to be doing very soon. So we've got this rising price action here that we've seen in some of the previous charts. And then hopefully it will start to accelerate once the bases are formed, and then we get a proper upward trend. For the moment, what's been happening here is we're in a consolidation phase where it's come right back to this buy level, and you can see why people have bought it, because that was the start of the upward trend. But we need a bit more evidence that this is based before we can jump in a similar way we would need this base to form and it to start to accelerate to jump on board from, that's how I would see it in any case. So I need this sort of lower trend line here or resistance line to break for me to get excited in the short term. But I do back the fact that they're very close to this support level here. And so I can see that people may be tempted to buy it ahead of that, and they could be right. It's just that I'd need to see a little bit more evidence, i.e. a break of this downward trend line or resistance line before I can sort of justify buying it. Ideally, 57 cents is the big barrier. So wherever you're buying it, if you're buying it here, this is the level it's going to potentially struggle to get through. So if it gets through that, you can also see how the downside really accelerated at that point, like close to it. Let's have a look. Was that 50? Yeah, sorry, 59 cents, close to 60 cents, accelerated to the downside. So there's going to be a lot of supply there. So if it gets through that, we can start talking about a much longer term base. But for the moment, I think it's a wait.
I like this one for the long term. I've got, there we go. Let me share my screen. I like this one. The quick view of their website. Basically, music on the blockchain, which makes sense to me that music should and could be NFTs, right? So music on the blockchain makes perfect sense to me, with music being NFTs, and they're well positioned as one of the leaders in this. So I like it, this one long term, and I like it short term. It's a pretty good price. Now, I did buy some of these after actually one of our videos. We looked at it before, and I did sell when it was higher. Recently, it was up at like 37 cents, and I sold to roll it into more OMI token. But don't get me wrong, I like this one tremendously. And so it's a little bit lower than this. For me, it's just a problem of not, still like so many things that I'm interested in. Its market cap's at 261 million. I like that a lot of the supply is in circulation. So it's got a 1.1 billion total supply or max supply, and 800 million is in circulation. So that's all good. I didn't see anything happening with this in the short term, which is why I went ahead and sold at a little bit of a gain to buy OMI, which had come down a lot more. So I felt like I was moving further ahead, but it was only a positional change. It's not like I'm disappointed in Audius at all. It was just, OMI came down and was twice as cheap as it was before, and my position on this was up by 7% or something. So for me, it's just a wait or a buy. I would buy more at this, but if I had a bunch of money sitting on the sidelines, and I do have some money sitting on the sidelines, but that money that I have sitting on the sidelines is waiting for such exceptional swing deals that I can't pass it up. And this isn't there. And that's why I have to rate this overall as a wait.
Okay.
Cool. Let's take a look at our next suggestion is Wanchain.
Yeah. So Wanchain, very interestingly, is still forming what I think is an inverse head and shoulders. I think we may have mentioned that last time. Either way, it's still in this basing phase. Very strong resistance up here at 25 cents. It's got to get through that before we can start talking about a bigger rally. But this looks like basing formation, looks like a basing pattern. The market is going sideways. It had a very strong move down here. See how it's going sideways. It's pivoting around the center of that, which is around 21 to 22 cents. The lows are rising. The resistance is very clear. So you could see how it's been capped at this 26 to 25 level very aggressively. So usually when the market does that, a breakthrough sends it into a much stronger impulse move. So I'd have to wait at this point. I mean, I could be sort of talked into buying it, I suppose, because it's forming this base, but I'd really need to see it through this 25 to 26 level to start this upward trend. So overall, I'm positive on it, but I just need that final confirmation trigger before I jump in. And I think also it would, if it did that, it would take this downward trend line out, which would be a really good sign for the longer term. So the fact that the base has gone on for a little bit longer isn't such a bad thing, because as I was saying before, the longer the base, usually the more solid the rally is. So the fact that it's taken a bit longer to start its impulsive move could actually end up being a positive sign. Now, obviously, I could be wrong and it might start to go down again. I would start to be concerned about it if it breaks 17 cents. So that would be my sort of warning level that perhaps not all is right. But for the moment, price action looks like it's basing. So I want to stay positive.
Awesome. So for you, it's a wait. Well, Paul wait. There we go. For me, I have a huge position in Wanchain, and I've continued to accumulate overall and more Wanchain. So my dollar cost average price is really, really good on this. So this is one of my largest holdings. So I like the price where it's at. If I didn't have such a large holding, I would be buying. I am farming on this, so in essence, I will be buying it anyway because I swap some of what I'm farming to get more Wanchain. But for me, I would just personally have it at a wait just because I have so much of this. Otherwise, it would be a buy because I like where the price is at on it. Let's take a look. Well, so this is Wanchain on the fundamentals. Let's look at a few things. The total supply and the max supply are both like we're not far away from that. And so I love that part of it. So most of the tokens are vested. And for such a high, like great team, like some of the smartest people in the industry, in my opinion, are on this team. And so 41 million market cap is really, really low, in my opinion, for such a great project. And so that's why I'm a really big fan of this project, and that's why we partnered with them. And on Friday live streams, we often give away some Wanchain because of that strategic partnership we have with them. All right, let's take a look at our last one, which is StarAtlas. And let me share your screen. There you go. Paul, we may have, I think, okay, I can hear you. Your screen looked frozen, but I've got you again. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Okay, great. Now this looks really interesting. I think we've talked about this before, but I'd like to know what sector this is in, because price action wise, it does look like it's trying to base. And I've drawn this line here that's my trigger level for the base, which is at 0.0098. So it's just below a cent. So it's very low, whatever it is. Now, if it can take out a cent, then it will have formed a double bottom. And for me, that would be a really interesting base for it to develop further in the upward trend. In the short term, we're very close to this support down here, which needs to hold. If it takes that support out, then I'm going to be a little bit concerned about it moving to a lower sort of price action area. But if it's in an interesting sector, I might even consider buying it because obviously because it's at such a low level. Not that that should be a reason, but I just like the fact that it is trying to base out here. And if it's doing the equivalent of, if we think about what the dollar index is doing, the dollar index is really close to its high. If this is trading inverse to that, and I'm right about the US dollar, and it starts to turn around and speculative funds come in as the dollar starts to weaken, then paradoxically, this might turn out to be a really interesting sort of inverse trade. So I like it when things work on the basis of correlations. And so it's kind of perhaps not the most obvious reason as to why I think this is a really interesting one to follow. But in very simple terms, I need a base to form before we can say buy. And that does come in through around 1 cent. So it's got to break that level before we say, it's completed a basing formation. But if we just go in slightly tighter here, this would have been a left shoulder, this would have been a head, and this would have been a right shoulder if it come up from here. And so it's a bit disappointing that it didn't make the base here, but again, this happens sometimes, and when it does, it usually means it's making a larger base, which means that the following rally will be larger. So it's a bit of a negative, but it could end up being a positive in the longer term. So for me, it's still a wait, but it looks very interesting. So I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on it.
For me, so Paul, it's a wait. And for me, it's a wait too. And I'll share why. Even though I like this project, and it's one of the ones I really, really hope is successful. Essentially, it's a space game with true ownership, right, on the blockchain. And I like the space games. One of my favorite games of all time is EVE Online. And so StarAtlas in some ways is kind of like a cross between EVE Online and Star Citizen, or that's the hope of it. Now, these games take a long time to develop. In fact, Star Citizen has been under development for almost 10 years now and is not actually out of beta. I think it might even still be in its alpha version. Now, they have a very, very huge scope, and StarAtlas's scope isn't quite as big as that, and they can actually piggyback off a lot of the lessons that Star Citizen has learned. But the Atlas team is really smart in that they've just told people or set expectations. It's going to take us 7 years really to have the game released, and that's realistic for this level of game. One of my concerns on why it's wait isn't just that, it's that only 2 billion of the 36 billion tokens are in circulation. So a lot more of the supply is going to continue to trickle out. And that's probably why the inverse head and shoulders didn't hold, is that probably some ecosystem tokens as well as pre-sale investors continue to get their tokens given to them. And they're possibly even still in profit. So the pre-sale investors, so they might be selling those tokens and taking some profits out. The token was way higher, but that's oftentimes why the curve looks like this, not just the pullback that we had in the market, but just the token investing savages those prices for a long time. Like if you look at Ecomi's token investing, a lot of the tokens vested during the bear market, but a lot of those tokens were vesting as well. And so a lot of these projects with tokens vesting, like Matic is a good example. Matic's tokens were vesting for a long time while the market was slow, and Matic took forever to do really well. But then finally, when it did do well, it went gangbusters. Come on, there we go. I mean, look at this time period where it was bouncing around between under a penny to a little bit over a penny. And of course now is, pulled back to just under $1, but it previously went as high as $2.74. Imagine you could have bought Matic for a penny. So during this period, see this long period where the tokens were vesting and now a lot of their supply is in circulation. But just realize some of that's going to be a problem for StarAtlas, and a lot of their supply won't be in circulation for quite a while. They realize it, and they probably have a lot of ecosystem tokens that are vesting. Now they're smart. They're going to do some mini games and other things to keep people's interest while the full game takes a while to develop. So for me, this is just a wait. Not that I'm not interested in this one. I'm very interested. I just want to feel better about the situation on the price of the token. And it's not like the fully diluted market cap is all that bad. This is actually decent, 235 million. I'm just waiting for cheaper to feel better about it, because it's going to be out of sight, out of mind for a while, unless we have all this money flood into the market, which I'm hoping happens. Love to see all this money flood into the market, but StarAtlas, when that happens, this will probably do well with everything else. But some of the other things that I am buying now, I hope will do even better should that bigger move happen. All right. Boy.
Cool.
Some great picks from audience members. I love the things that they bring to our attention and put in front of you, in front of us, because yeah, they really make, you know, in the audience, you're making some really good suggestions. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. And yeah, definitely a very interesting market. So I look forward to the future picks.
Yeah, Paul, thank you so much for your time and for joining us. And thank you for sharing with us, yeah, your thoughts.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, guys. So
the market's down. And that's just part of being here in crypto winter. It's come a little bit differently than we expected. And you know, that happens. But just know that decisions that you make during this massive pullback, they can really change your life when the market does turn around. And that's what happened for me. I was smart enough, I guess, just knew enough about investment cycles to stick around when the market got really slow in 2018, 2019, 2020. I personally made the choice to put in as much money as I could without borrowing. I didn't borrow any money to put money in, but I put in as much as I could every paycheck into the market while it was way, way down. And it had some life-changing results over the next couple of years. And it would seem like that cycle will repeat. Anyway, this wrap is for all of you rainmakers. This is basically to reinforce the principles that I share that make all the difference for higher returns. Thanks so much.
Came into the space chasing all of the gains, chasing the pumps and all of the hype trains. But like in life, shit right before you could. Was told to buy when it was pouring like a rainmaker should. Buy when it's down, don't chase the boats that I miss. Cause I always make the time in mind. I stick the one out cause I'm patient like that. And I'll wait for the right time. I sell when it's high, I buy when it's low. They call me rich, they call me smart. I'm just a rainmaker running the show. Calculated investments, I don't leave with my heart. Principles are simple, to leave in a mark. Buy when it's boring, just gotta be smart. I sell when it's hype, like all the channels they pump it. That's when I was selling, go parabolic and dump it. They call me rich, they call me smart. I'm a rainmaker, making my own start. I'm with the future, learning the past. Makes the time fly by, years going so fast. The game plan is mine, I'll own it now. When I reach the top, haters asking me how. Cause I'm a rainmaker, investments I love. And I follow what I learn, not relying on luck. Time is never better, the time like the present. This next 5 years is a gift and it's feeling like heaven. I'm committed to learn, to study and to know that nothing comes easy but with knowledge the game show. Sticking out this wrong can soon become a bear market. Learning and growing and when it's slow will be the target. They say it's come out, Bitcoin is dead. The massive decreases can get to your head. I'm sticking around, the time is better. I'm strong like that, I'll let the others be fretters. 2 years time the ball will bring back the gains. That makes it worth the effort cause here comes the rain. So let's go rainmakers, let's make it all happen. Let go of the hate, say the haters be crapping. I'm here for 5 years, let's do this together. The time is right, the time could be better. They call me rich, they call me smart. I'm a rainmaker, making my own start. I'm with the future, learning the past. Makes the time fly by, years going so fast. This game plan is mine, I'll own it now. When I reach the top, haters asking me how. Cause I'm a rainmaker, investments I love, and I'll follow what I learn, not relying on luck. Haters be hating, but time to slow down. Addressing what they say when I'm wearing my crown. They're chasing green candles like someone who was new. I got a vision that was bigger, helping me to push through. I'm still human and sometimes it is rough, and that's what makes me special, simply I stay tough. Cause I'm a rainmaker, investments I love, and I follow what I learn, not relying on luck.